Hi, welcome back to Great Eastern Model Railway. Just thought I'd give you an update on where I got to so far with track laying on these first couple of boards. So this is pretty much where I left you last time. So I'll take you through what I've done to get to where I am at the moment. The first decision I had to make was sleeper spacing. And as you can see, I went ahead and decided to respace the sleepers and created quite a lot of work. But the end result doesn't look that much different on camera. In the reel it looks a lot more realistic, and I'm sure once ballasted and weathered down it will look even better. So what I do is get a piece of track like this onto the layout. I'll show you, and mercifully it's speeded up a bit. First thing I do is prepare the track for the droppers. So remove the webbing on the back and tin and solder the cables onto the bottom of the track. Do this with the cables facing inwards so they can both go down the same hole, as it makes a neater finish in my opinion. This section of track has two sets of droppers as it will be going across the baseboard join, and as such, once the track's been cut, obviously each section will need its own supply, as I like to have, where possible, power to each track individually. Once this is done, I'll start on the sleeper separation, initially taking the expansion pieces off first, as it's gentler to the track to do this whilst the remainder of the track is still attached. And then once that's done, just go through the rest and take out all the adjoining pieces of webbing, which is a lot more fun at this speed. Once this has been done, I use a special measuring stick to just make sure, roughly speaking, the sleepers are in the right space, and I've got the right amount still remaining on the track. I do now have quite a few spare sleepers. And once this is done for the other two sections, the track's then ready to go on the board. Once lined up on the board, first thing to do is to ensure that the droppers are marked up and drilled at the right position, cleaned up, and then go for a bit of a fit just to make sure the track does actually fit, lined up where it should do. Then when I'm happy with that, I'll just tease it out, leave it to one side, whilst I use copy decks to prepare the track for gluing. Use it straight away rather than let the copy decks go off, as obviously I need the working time to do any final positioning of the sleepers. Again, just doing one section. And taking off any pieces of webbing that have been left behind. And then once that's done, we can then just look down the track and with a steel rule just make sure everything's lined up where it should be. Don't mind the odd slight imperfection, as it tends to be more recreate the real thing, but it's always nice to have the track pointing at least roughly. And once I'm happy with that, weigh it down with some weights and let it go off. For the final piece to go in, obviously without putting too much stress on the track, I need to find a different way of getting the rail joiners on. So the rail joiners on the opposite end to what I'm working on now have been pushed all the way through onto the piece that's track that's already there. Then use a pair of pliers and just move the rail joiners along the track, and in this way it stops forcing the track into a place where it doesn't want to be during the assembly process. Followed by the ever-present sleeper respacing. Nice short piece of track this time, so it doesn't take quite so long. And once I'm happy with the final alignment, I'll just weigh it down as with all the others. And that's the bottom level complete. This is the extent of progress to date. As you can see, the track works in on these first few boards as much as possible, at least until I can get some more baseboards constructed. This is the main station goods area, a couple of sidings, and there'll be some form of goods shed here. The only thing I have at the moment is a Metcalf kit, which, along with quite a lot of the other buildings, didn't survive the move terribly well. So I'll probably have to do something different there. But it doesn't matter. This siding was going to be a cattle dock, and probably still will be, but I've also decided to put a couple of insulated rail joiners at this end and have this as a programming track controlled by a switch from the main panel, so I can switch between programming use and track use. Moving over to the station throat at this end of the layout, as you can see, trains arriving in from on this line can choose either this platform or that platform, or indeed use a crossover to come across into the other platforms or off into the carriage sidings as required. Moving further along, we have the junction for locomotives going off to the depot, which is accessed or a crossover here and a point here, and the journey down is protected by a catch point here, which obviously need to be signalled at some stage. This joint caused me the most issues. As with all the others, I just glued it with Copydex to start with, thinking that there was enough of a straight on the right hand side that wouldn't be an issue. However, when I cut the track sprung out, so clearly it wasn't on quite such a straight bit as I thought it was, and couldn't be used, so I had to rethink that. So I sunk a couple of screws in and soldered the bottom of the tracks to that, and so far it seems to be holding it quite nicely, but time will tell if this is going to be the permanent solution. So this will be the branch line station area. There's two platforms either side for a nice station building here. I've got my eye on one, which is about the only Great Eastern themed building I've seen that's not going to be a scratch built, which is probably beyond my capabilities at the moment. One of the things I am going to try and do is integrate the branch line platforms with the mainline platforms somehow, so there's some means of access between the two, because obviously with these both being islands, there's no opportunity to have a station building here, and a subway from here to somewhere else would look a bit odd, I think. So we'll see what we come up with. And moving over to the goods yard at this end, again had to rethink this a little bit, as when I raised the baseboards up to the final level, I realised that the garage operating mechanism impinged further into the layout, so I had to do a bit of a slight rethink. There was going to be a siding here and these two going off here, but changed it now so there's two sides going off here and a little one going off here,
which is only going to get used for things like guard spans and stuff like this. And obviously from here there'll be a head shunt going off, and this rejoins the main line on the next board. So what next? Well, I think for the next couple of weeks or so, I'll be spent beginning to wire this lot up, together with provision for the rest of the layout, which is 16 to 18 individual blocks plus unmonitored sections to account for. So there's going to be quite a busy wiring system. To that end, there'll be a separate power block underneath this section here, which will house obviously the power supply units and the block detectors as the wires go off. And underneath this section probably I'll have a control section which will house the PLC if I decide to use that again, or if not, whatever it is that I decide to use to operate the points and signals and take the feed in from the block detection system. So plenty to be getting on with. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'll leave another video up here somewhere, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.